Here's a government that's carried the burden of change in the post-war years from you indolent, useless Liberals, you indolent, useless Liberals.
You'll have an opportunity to speak at a later point in the debate. The question is the motion be agreed to. The Honourable the Treasurer.
Mr Deputy Speaker, what we just heard was a motion moved by the Shadow Treasurer who couldn't sustain the debate. It was the limpest performance one has ever seen. He could 7 minutes into the speech he couldn't sustain it. He couldn't sustain the speech. It was like being flogged with a warm lettuce. Flogged with a warm lettuce. As he got up, you know, mauled by a dead sheep. Mauled by a dead sheep. And the height of him, was, his last point is, where is your fiscal responsibility? This is a government which has taken a 7% deficit in the public sector borrowing requirement and turned it to a surplus of 1.25% and cut outlays by 7% of GDP, and he's got the gall to ask us, where is our fiscal responsibility? But I mean the height of him, his 22% of outlays, and they've attacked and ripped and torn at every spending decision the government's made for 7 years. My colleagues and I, who sit on the front bench, 5 of us who sat there for 3 months a year, twice a year, for 7 years cutting outlays, it's now his. He's expropriated it because he's going to add 140 million, he says, to a budget of 90,000 million. I mean, the pathetic quality of that remark. I mean, the shame of it all. I mean, you just should. Look, the thing about you lot, you've just got no shame. Maybe you're just a breed. You're just a breed. When you pop into this world, you're born with no shame. You know, maybe you're just a breed. But the gall to ask us, where is our fiscal responsibility? When you went to the last election with your former leader offering $7.8 billion worth of unfunded tax cuts, and we went with a $400 million package which was fully paid for. And you're talking about where is the fiscal responsibility? And the gall of you last week saying that you'd have a fiscal policy which was lower than ours as a proportion of GDP. That is, absconding with all of our work over 7 years, all those months in those expenditure review committee meetings. And then he's got the hide to say our fiscal policy will be 22% of outlays. That's like us. We end up with this enormous level of government spending, 30.7% of GDP. We finally rebuild the building, a proper building, and then it's like building the Empire State Building and this joker jumping in the lift, going to the top and putting a brick on top and saying, look what we've done, ours is bigger. Ours is bigger, you mug. You mug. Those expenditure review committee meetings, cutting down public outlays from nearly 31% of GDP to 23%, and copying your criticism for nearly every one of them, one after the other, for nearly every one of them. And then we bring down a budget with outlays to GDP just above 22% in a year or two's time, and you'll say you'll knock 140 million off it all, and it's all yours. As I said, it's like we've built the structure of fiscal policy. As I said, it's like building the Empire State Building, and then you jumping in the lift and running to the top and putting a brick on top and saying, look what I've built. Look what I've built. I mean, it's a joke. You talking about fiscal responsibility. But then,
secondly, Mr Speaker, Australia achieved its first public sector surplus, and that was the first time in the history of this government, in the history of this country. Mr Speaker, beforehand, when all those years of Conservative government, never once had you been able to achieve a public sector surplus. But we did it in the last government. We did it once, we did it again, and then we did it the third time. And, Mr Speaker, as a result of that, of course, it follows that the government made no call on the nation's savings.
Account deficit and debt and inflation, but what's the solution? To give away $2.5 billion worth of tax expenditures. That's it. I mean, and spend it. Yeah, cut it and spend it. I mean, that's the solution. I mean, it's unbelievable. But
next, Mr Speaker, we cut company tax rates from 49 cents to 39 cents.
As I said last night, the real Lulu in the whole thing, The key line is the third last paragraph on page 22. By reducing inflation and shifting the weight off monetary policy, they'll lower interest rates. That is, we will have lower inflation, but in the company of lower interest rates. Now, this would be a world first. They're actually going to have inflation lower without the help of interest rates, because interest rates will be lower too. Well, I mean, there wouldn't be an economist, an economic institute, the OECD, the IMF, nobody would regard that statement seriously. They regard that as a joke.
Next, Mr Speaker, we lowered assistance to sugar, tobacco, dried vine, fruits and citrus industries.
Look, you haven't got a ghost of a show. Imagine you lot managing, you say there's a debt crisis. I mean, imagine you lot managing a crisis. Could you imagine it? I mean, you'd be just, you can't even manage yourself in this place, managing a crisis. And here you are.
Order.
You know, you're talking about the debt and the current account crisis, but when you get your big chance to really do something about it, what do you say? We'll have a weaker fiscal policy. I mean, in the end, you're the same dismal, thoughtless old crowd that you were in 1980-81. Said you go back to the action plan. What's the key line? By reducing inflation and shifting the weight off monetary policy. How do you reduce inflation and shift the weight off monetary policy? You say by cutting wages. But how do you cut wages without monetary policy? And the three of you are there. As I said, the tragic trio. The member for Wentworth, the member for Bennelong and Senator Stone. The three people who've already destroyed the economy once and want to return bout. They want to come back and have a second go. But you wouldn't mind if they said, well, we've used 7 years to think. We've used 7 years to think about our structure. We'll have something different. Oh, no thinking. Adopt the government's fiscal policy, adopt all of its deregulation, adopt its structure, and what we'll do is we'll have the same policy, enterprise bargaining, kid the craft structure doesn't exist, let the wage mayhem start, and we'll bring interest rates down on them and give Australia a recession, because that's what it really needs. It'll cut the import growth and lower the inflation rate. I mean, that's your dull policy. That's the bankruptcy of you. You have nothing in terms of any creativity or ingenuity. You have nothing as a party or as individuals. No party in the world would see done to a country what you three did to Australia and then have the front to propose you again to manage the economy. No, this is not a policy. It's a sham. It's a joke. It has no macroeconomic structure. Andrew's laughing there. If the Prime Ministership was ever lifted on him, he would quake in his boots. Quake in his boots. He wants what he always wanted in life, a near victory. Andrew's best result is to nearly win. He loves to nearly win because winning carries responsibility, and the one thing he shies off responsibility like Dracula from a wooden stake. He'd run back that far from any real responsibility. Mr. Speaker, the proposition's a joke, and the government will be opposing it.